Bonjour class! So today, hold on. I forgot to make a new card. Sorry. Today, we're starting lesson 23. When I said that you were going to learn a new tense in lesson 22, that was because I was lying to you. It's actually a new lesson. So we're done with lesson 22. We're not going to quiz over it because it was basically just a review of the passé composé. But we are going to quiz over lesson 23, so after we do all of the videos for it, I think there's just going to be two or three, then we will quiz over lesson 23, which is what this is. So as I have been hinting, it is now time to learn a new tense. So far, you know the present tense, just basic conjugations. You know the passé composé, which you just reviewed, so it should be pretty fresh in your mind. And that's it. You know the near future, but that's not really a tense, right? Because it's made up of a present tense form and an infinitive. So it's not really its own tense with new endings and stems. So what you need to know about this new tense is that it is also a past tense. But Ms. Harris, we already know the passé composé. How is there another past tense? We will talk more about the difference between them, like when to use imparfait and when to use passé composé next video. I'll touch on it a little bit after we look at the sentences I have as your examples, but we're going to save sort of the nitty-gritty how to tell when to use which past tense in the next video. So, without further ado, let me show you what the imparfait looks like. Où est-ce que tu habitais avant? Où est-ce que tu habitais avant? Okay, so I've bolded our imperfect verb right here so you can see it. So, translation, where did you live before? Where did you live before? Où est-ce que tu habitais avant? Okay, already you should be noticing some things about this. Think about the other past tense you know, the passé composé, and how this is different. Take a second. One thing should stand out to you pretty heavily, and it's that habiter here is one word, right? So the passé composé is two words, a helping verb and a past participle. The imparfait is just one word. One word. Okay, where did you live before? Let's look at another one. J'habitais à Bordeaux. J'habitais à Bordeaux. Right? Once again, just one word. Interesting. And translated, I lived or I used to live in Bordeaux. Okay, so this kind of translation, I used to live, is pretty common when we're translating imparfait verbs from French into English, and that has to do with when we use this construction, when we use the imparfait. Let's look at another. Qu'est-ce que vous faisiez à 6 heures? Qu'est-ce que vous faisiez à 6 heures? Okay, what were you doing at 6? What were you doing at 6? Okay, faisiez, right? Faisiez. So you can tell that this is probably from faire. It is, to do or to make. And you know that if we said qu'est-ce que vous avez fait à 6 heures, right, the passé composé, that would mean what did you do at 6? What did you do? But you can see here with faire in the imparfait, we translate it as what were you doing? Okay, what were you doing, not what did you do? Okay, so a subtle difference there, giving you a hint maybe about when you use imparfait and when you use passé composé. Nous finissions nos devoirs. Nous finissions nos devoirs. We were finishing our homework. We were finishing our homework. Okay, interesting, right? It's one word. If I said, nous avons fait nos devoirs, nous avons fait, the passé composé, we would translate it as we finished our homework. We finished. But in the imparfait, we translate it as we were finishing our homework. Okay, So I want you, for extra credit, to send me an email. Let's say this is 5 points of extra credit. I want you to send me an email. What do you think the difference between the imparfait and the passé composé is? What situations do you think you use the imparfait in? Okay, don't look it up. I will give you extra credit regardless of if you're right. So I want you to just think, based on these sentences and based on these translations, why would I use the imparfait and not the passé composé? Just think, give me your best guess, your best educated guess, and I will give you extra credit for it, regardless of whether or not you're actually correct. Okay, so now that you've seen the imparfait, you need to know how to form it, right? So the imparfait is formed like this. There's an imperfect stem and an imperfect ending. Okay. So you know how to get stems, right? You've done them with conjugating in the present tense. You drop the ER, the RE, or the IR for regular verbs. It's a little bit different for the imparfait. The imperfect stem is different than the regular stem. And then the imperfect ending, it's just a list of endings that I'm going to give you. You see a few of them here, right? AIS, AIS, IEZ, IONS. Okay? So the imperfect stem, the first part, the habite, fez, finis, you get that by taking the new form of the present tense minus ONS. The new form of the present tense minus ONS. Don't worry, I will show you what that looks like in the next slide. Okay, so imperfect stem, imperfect ending. Both of them are special. Here are the endings. So the ending for je is AIS. Please stop. The ending for tu is AIS. The ending for il, elle is AIT. The ending for nous is IONS. The ending for vous is IEZ. And the ending for il, elle plural is AIENT. These are the endings. They are the same always. These are always the imperfect endings. There's no irregular endings. It's a very regular tense. Okay, so these are always the endings, no matter what the verb is. Doesn't change. And almost all of the imperfect stems are also easy to find. As long as you can conjugate the verbs in the new form, you can get the imperfect stem. Let me show you. So remember, the imperfect stem is the new form of the verb in the present tense minus ONS. So for example, parler, right? The verb parler. The new form of parler is parlons. Okay? Parlons minus ONS is parle. Okay, so our stem for parler is parle. Ms. Harris, that's the same as if you just dropped the ER. I know, and for ER verbs, that's usually true. But the reason we say you take the new form is because of irregular verbs and because of IR and RE verbs. They're different. I will show you after we look at parler. So you take this stem and you just add these endings on. So, je parlais, tu parlais, il, elle parlait, nous parlions, vous parliez, il, elle parlait. Okay, I was speaking, you were speaking, he was speaking, she was speaking, we were speaking, you all were speaking, they were speaking. Okay? Notice it's were speaking and not spoke. Alright? To negate the imparfait, it's exactly what you think. Ne pas around the verb. Je ne parlais pas. I was not speaking. And in a question, same thing. Exactly how you did expect. Est-ce que tu parlais? Were you speaking? Okay, so we've looked at an ER verb. Let's look at another. An IR verb. Okay, so here's where it becomes important that it's the new form and you're not just taking the ending off of the infinitive. So finir The new form of finir is finissant, right? The new ending for IR verbs is ISOS. So we drop the ONS, which means our stem is finis. Finis. Okay? Add our endings. Je finissais, tu finissais, il, elle finissait, nous finissons. That's wrong. Finissions. Correct? Finissions, finissiez. Oh la la. Sorry. Imperfect endings. Finissions, finissiez, finissez. I was finishing, you were finishing, he, she was finishing, etc. Okay? Serious, what about an RE verb? Great question. So vendre, new form is vendant. Drop the ONS, vend. Add the endings. Vendez, 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 vendions, vendiez, vendez. I was selling, you were selling, he was selling, she was selling, etc. Okay? Not too bad, right? It's pretty easy to find the stem. All you have to do for the endings is memorize them, and they're always the same. However, there are a couple things, actually, we're not however yet. There are a couple phrases that I want you to remember for the imparfait. So, il y a, which you know means there is or there are. What if I want to say there were? Okay? So, right, the verb in il y a is avoir. The new form of avoir is avant. Drop the ONS. Our stem is av. We add the ending for il y avait. There were. There were. Okay? Another time you'll use the imperfect is with weather expressions. So, for example, il neige, it's snowing. In the imparfait is il neigeait, it was snowing. Same with il pleut, it's raining. Il pleuvait, it was raining. Okay? So, like I said, l'imparfait is super regular. It's a really regular tense. Every single verb in the French language, you can get the stem by taking the new form of the verb and dropping ONS, except for one. There is one verb in the French language that does not end in ONS in the new form. Only one. So it has a special stem. I'll bet you can guess that it was être, right? So être is like maybe the most irregular verb you know. And its irregular stem is E acute T. Et. Okay? But same endings. So you just add the endings. J'étais, tu étais, il, elle était, nous étions, vous étiez, il, elle, étaient. Right? I was, you were, he or she was. Okay? This is the only one that's irregular, that has an irregular stem. That's it. So this one is tricky. Using it is tricky because if you remember, a lot of the imperfect we end up translating as like I was finishing, we were doing, whatever. And so I know that this means was or were, I was, you were. But the imperfect of être is used to tell where people were or how they were feeling, not to describe what they were doing. Because the normal imperfect does that. Let me show you so it's more clear. Right, so I can say j'étais chez moi. J'étais chez moi, I was at my house. Right, so that's where I was. But what I was doing, I wouldn't say j'étais étudié. I would say j'étudiais, because this means I was studying. Right, I was studying. This is confusing because in French they use one word to say this, where in English we say two, right? Was studying. Kind of like how in the passé composé, the French have two words and we usually just have one. J'étudiais, I was studying. See also, Alice était malade. Alice était malade. Alice was sick. Describes how she was feeling. But elle regardait la télé. She was watching TV. That's what she was doing. So that gets a verb other than être. Make sense? Okay. that is it for this section of the notes. Like I said, in our next video, your next section of notes, in your next practice, we're going to talk more about when to use the imparfait and when to use passé composé and kind of what the difference is, why you would use one and not the other. But hopefully you emailed me your guess already, your educated guess. Let's take a look at your practice for this though. So I just want you to practice forming the imparfait. Practice finding the stem, the imperfect stem, and practice adding the ending and putting them together to use the imperfect. Okay, so first up, dites where the following people, to say where the following people were yesterday and what each of them was doing. Choose from the list the expression that logically fits. Okay, so in the first blank for all of these, you will use the imparfait of être. Okay, every time. It will always be the imparfait of être. So it'll always be e acute t and then the appropriate ending. The next blank in the sentence is where you choose from the box. Okay, so you can see here, tu étais au supermarché. You were at the supermarket. What were you doing there? The one that makes sense is faire les courses, doing the shopping. So we just need to put faire in the passé composé, in the imparfait. The new form of faire is faisant. So we drop the ONS, gives us the sum of fait, F-A-I-S, and then we add our ending for tu, A-I-S. Faisais, tu faisais les courses. Okay, so imparfait of être in the first blank, expression from the box in the second blank, conjugated in the imparfait. Great. Next, same thing basically, but I give you the verb directly. So life has changed a lot since 1900. Say if yes or no, people did the following things in 1900. Okay, so you need to decide, did people do the verb in parentheses in 1900? Let's look at our examples. Travailler, work. Did people work a lot in 1900? Yes. Okay, so affirmative sentence. You just change travailler, you conjugate it for the imperfect. On travaillait beaucoup. People worked a lot. People were working a lot. Okay, what about habiter dans de grands immeubles? Dans de grands immeubles. Okay, so you do have to read the rest of the sentence. You can't tell just from the verb. So did people live in big apartment buildings in 1900? No, they did not. So you just negate it, right? So you still conjugate habiter in the imparfait, but you negate it, ne pas, around the verb. That is it. There will be a key on here for you to check your work, but it's just practicing forming it, getting used to finding that imperfect stem and adding the endings. And let me know if you have any questions. And I'll see you next video for some more for grammar, for how to tell when to use passé composé and when to use imparfait. Au revoir!